Long ago, nestled at the edge of the Obudu Mountains, there was a village called Udara. The villagers were quiet, deeply respectful of the old ways. Outsiders who passed through said Udara felt strange, like the air refused to move. The trees bent toward the village as if listening. People in the nearest town whispered that no one in Udara ever smiled after dusk. The villagers spoke little of their past, but they held one tradition without fail. Every 7 years, on the 7th night of the 7th moon, every door and window must be sealed shut, and no fire lit. No one was to speak. Children were told it was a night of silence for the ancestors. But in truth, it was something else. Only the village priestess, Mama Ekima, knew the full story. She was old, so old, her spine curved like a river bend, and her eyes looked like whetstones. Some said she hadn't aged in decades. When children asked why, their parents silenced them with sharp glances. But Mama Ekema would sometimes mutter to herself, eyes glazed, about the thing beneath the soil. One year, a boy named Oji broke the silence. He was just 12, wide-eyed and full of questions. That night, his curiosity burned stronger than his fear. He whispered to his sister just once. By morning, he was gone. They found his body days later near the village stream. His skin was still warm, but every bone in his body had been twisted the wrong way. His eyes were open, glassy, looking toward a mountain. That year, Mo began to fear the 7th moon. One moon cycle ago, something changed. Chickens began laying eggs with black shells. Dogs howled at the river instead of the moon. Crops grew bitter, and a strange smell hung in the air like burnt feathers and old blood. Mama Ikema locked herself in her shrine, refusing food. She painted strange symbols on her door in ashen clay. Then 2 hunters vanished in the forest. Only one returned. He stumbled into the village at dawn, his skin crawling with ants. His eyes rolled so far back that only the whites showed. He screamed in tongues until his heart stopped beating in front of the shrine. Before he died, he kept pointing east, toward the forgotten side of the mountain, the place no one went, the place where the trees didn't grow. That evening, Mama Ikema came out, her lips stained red from kola nuts. She told the elders, "It has returned," no one asked what. That night, the shadows in Udara moved on their own. The moonlight wouldn't touch the ground. Children wept in their sleep. The drums in the shrine played themselves, slow and deep, like something breathing. An old man tried to leave the village. He never made it past the gate. They found only his sandals and a single feather, glowing, wet with something thick and dark. The villagers gathered at dawn. Mama Ikema stood in the center. "The curse is not buried, it sleeps." A cold wind blew, even though the air was still. "Do not speak its name," she whispered, "or it will wake up." But someone already had. The one who spoke the name was Nnadi, a restless young man who had left Udara years ago to live in the city. He returned when his mother fell ill. He scoffed at the village ways, called the silence superstition, and told the others that fear had turned them into shadows of themselves. On the night of the 6th moon, he found an old scroll tucked beneath his mother's mattress. The script was written in Nsibidi, the ancestral language. Nnadi could not read it, but he traced the markings with his finger and spoke aloud the only word that seemed clear. Obianyo. The silence in the room cracked like thin ice. Candles blew out. The walls creaked as if something pressed against them from outside. His mother, who had been unconscious for days, suddenly opened her mouth and let out a sound that wasn't hers. It was deep, hollow. like a drum being played in a grave. Nnadi ran from the hut, heart pounding, but wherever he turned, the trees seemed to follow him. They shifted subtly, their branches curling like fingers. The moon above had turned pale green. The next day, Mama Ekema called a gathering in the village square. Her face was drawn, her breath short. "He said the name," she rasped. "He is called the Sleeper." She limped to the shrine and returned with an object wrapped in goat skin. When she unwrapped it, the crowd gasped. It was a mask, not carved from wood, but bone, human bone. Its eyes were empty, and its mouth was wide with jagged edges like teeth. The mask shimmered faintly in the light, bleeding shadow into the air around it. "This was worn by the first priest," Mama Ekema said, "the one who made the pact." She looked at Nnadi, who stood trembling near the edge of the crowd. "Now the pact is broken." That night drums echoed again, but this time they weren't from the shrine. They came from the forest. At midnight, the trees near the edge of the village began to move, not from wind, but with purpose. A path opened through the woods, narrow and dark, lined with old roots like twisted limbs, and something came out. First, they saw its shadow, tall, hunched, with arms too long for its body. Then came the sound of breathing, slow and wet, like lungs soaked in water. It stepped into the moonlight. Its body was wrapped in strips of human skin, stitched together. His face was hidden behind a mask of bone. But its eyes were still alive, and they wept. Mama Ekema dropped to her knees. "Obianyo," she whispered, "the cursed child of the soil, born of blood, raised in silence, the one we buried before he could speak." Nnadi screamed, but it was too late. Obianyo raised his hand and the ground cracked open beneath the village. Screams tore through the night. Flames erupted where water once flowed. Chickens exploded into feathers. Clay pots shattered from sound alone. The mask fell from Mama Ekema's hand. Obianyo picked it up and placed it on Nnadi's face. Nnadi's body became rigid as the mask fused to his face. He clawed at it, but his hands passed through the bone like smoke. His mouth opened to scream, but only a thick gurgling sound came out like drowning in ash. His legs buckled, but he did not fall. The creature Obianyo stood before him, watching. Then slowly it stepped back into the forest path. The trees parted once more, whispering with a voice no human should understand, and Nnadi followed. His footsteps were slow, uneven, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. The villagers stared, frozen in place. No one moved, no one spoke. The drums had stopped. The air was heavy with fear, so thick it crawled into their throats. Mama Ekema crawled toward the fire pit. Her fingers trembled as she drew a circle in the dust, marking the 4 ancestral directions with crushed kola, palm ash, and dried blood. She began to chant, but the wind screamed back at her. A force swept through the village like a tide of bones, snapping doors off their hinges, ripping thatched roofs apart, turning cooking stones into ash. The ground trembled with every word Mama Ekema spoke, but it wasn't enough. From the shadows of the trees, Obianyo's voice echoed, no longer just breath, but layered with countless others. The voices of the drowned, the broken, the cursed, they spoke as one. "You forgot me." The shrine split in two. Every mask inside, ancestral mask carved and kept for generations, crumbled into powder. Mama Ekema gasped, blood streamed from her nose. She reached into the circle and pulled out a blade made of black stone, the one her mother had sworn never to use unless the earth called the dead to dance. She cut her palm and smeared the blood across her face, whispering a final plea to the ancestors. But silence answered. She slumped forward, dead. The villagers scattered in every direction, running toward the river, the forest, the hills, anywhere but that path. But the trees would not let them pass. Roots burst from the earth, wrapping around ankles and waists, dragging bodies back. Screams pierced the sky. At dawn, Odara was empty. No smoke rose from its fires. No chickens clucked. No voices echoed from the market square. Only one sound remained. Drums, faint, distant, deep in the woods. And if you followed them, if you dared step off the path, you might see them. A line of villagers, faces blank, their eyes replaced with darkness. They marched behind a figure draped in stitched skin, its mask weeping shadow, its steps never hurried but never stopping. Some say Obianyo leads them in circles, around and around, forever. Others say the march heads toward the next village, and once every 7 years, on the 7th night of the 7th moon, new drums begin to play, farther out, closer. So if your fire dies too early, or you hear whispers beneath your floor, or your chickens stop laying, seal your windows, hide your children, do not speak its name. And if you hear drums in the dark, don't follow them. Keep the silence alive. Share this tale and never forget Obianyo.